Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Game Design Archive with Edward and Ludwig.
Hello.
Hello. Today, we're going to talk about pressure mechanics.
Yes. So, pressure, what do we mean? Well, in modern game design, we always start the videos the same way. In modern game design, there seems to be a trend to not put a lot of pressure on the player. And I guess we're here to say that that's a lot of times a mistake. And so, what do we mean? Well, basically, in order for a game to be interesting,
So
I think, go
if I
ahead.
can add one thing to what you said,
Yeah.
is that if you read a lot of game design literature or whatever you want to call it, right? How to design games, right? There is this argument, right, that there's a lot of arguments, right, that we might not agree with, I guess, but one of them is this idea that this thing makes it not fun, so don't do that or whatever, right? And pressure is one of those things, right?
Yeah.
So what at least I feel like is that a lot of newer games, some of them have a lot of difficulty, as in they can be very hard, but they're not putting any pressure on the player, right?
Yes.
Because pressure is bad, because it makes you feel stressed, and stress is bad or something, right? And obviously they're like, just to clarify, right, there are some exceptions to this, right, which would be like something where you're like, like very creative games, like toy style games or whatever you want to call them, right? Like Minecraft or whatever, right? Something like that, something where you just build stuff or whatever, because then it's obviously just you're doing it. Yeah, you get what I'm saying, right? You're doing it because
you're doing it to be creative or something.
Yeah, exactly. It's not about the game and the challenge in the game, like, right?
Yeah.
I
just want to go back and sort of define pressure a bit, because there can be several interpretations of it, I guess. And what I would say is most important is that a game punishes the player for playing passively, right? That's what I mean with pressure. So because that's a problem with a lot of modern games, that you can take your time, you can play it really slow, you can play it really carefully, and the game doesn't force you to engage with it. You can sort of engage with it at your own pace, right? If that makes sense.
Yep.
And that's generally less interesting.
But to ask a counter question there, right?
Yes.
Why is that? And in my mind, it's because if you don't pressure the player, then I guess there's basically no stakes, right? But
yeah.
But it how should I say this? Like, the challenge is not as interesting in a way, right? Because the optimal way will be to not, like, if we have a turn-based strategy game, for example, if there's no pressure in a turn-based strategy game, the best strategy is to take as much time as you can, usually, right?
Yeah, I think that's a very good example.
Or grind in an RPG or whatever, right?
Yeah, because XCOM is a pretty famous example of this, like the XCOM remakes. Because in XCOM 1, they didn't have any pressure, right?
Yeah.
So the optimal strat was always to stand at the edge of the fog of war and slowly progress very carefully, one step at a time, with one guy at a time, and stuff like that. Whereas in XCOM 2, they realized that this was a problem, and they added turn timers for most missions. So it's you need to do this mission in 8 turns. And I think XCOM 2 is way more interesting than XCOM 1 because of that. Because all of a sudden, you need to actually, you need to be aggressive, but you can't be too aggressive, right? You need to, balance that.
Yeah.
Whereas in XCOM, the solution was always to be as passive as possible.
Yeah.
Or in XCOM 1, sorry, to be clear.
Yeah, you can argue if that's like the optimal solution to that problem, but it's at least a solution, right? I think we've talked about that before in the past, right? Where it's like,
it's a bit of a band-aid, right? But it's still better than having the problem.
Yeah, because it feels very forced, right? Where it's like,
Yeah.
no, you need to do this in this way, right? Which is fine sometimes. I'm not one of those people that are like, oh no, you can't have forceful mechanics or whatever, like timers and stuff. I think that's totally fine. I'm just saying that having it, there might be more interesting ways to do that in that case, right?
Yeah. And I guess speaking of time, one thing that I want to clarify is that pressure isn't necessarily time pressure. So it can be time pressure, as we said. And that can both be like a real-time timer, like some action games have, where it's like you need to do this in a set amount of real-world time. But it can also be like a turn timer, like in XCOM, right? So you can spend 2 hours in an XCOM mission, or you can spend 30 minutes, and there's still 8 turns limit, right? Yeah. But then it's not necessarily either of those as well. And one example that I want to bring up, that's very topical. Well, not very recently, because Silksong came out like a year ago or so. When did that come out? Oh, whatever.
Autumn last year.
Yeah. So that's runbacks. So runbacks isn't time pressure, right? It's not turn time pressure, it's not real time pressure, but it's still pressure, because let's say we have a boss in Silksong. If I die at that boss, I need to go back to the last checkpoint, and then I need to walk through the entire area again to get to that boss. And that's like annoying, because I need to do that over and over and over again every time I get to the boss, or every time I die at the boss. And as you sort of mentioned in the beginning, a lot of people see this and they say, well, having a runback is bad game design. You should have a checkpoint just before the boss, right?
Yeah, because it's frustrating or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Or it's a waste of time, they say. Yeah. But the thing is...
To be fair, in a way it is, right? But that's not the point, right?
Yeah.
You could argue for real that it is a waste of time, but the point is not that that's the point. It's trading some of your time for some pressure, right? In a way.
Yeah. And like the best example
that might be a bit harsh to some other I don't know, but like
I think it
theory
depends
you could
a lot.
Argue that, right?
Yeah, it depends a lot on like how it's implemented as well, because there are games that have like super boring runbacks and stuff.
Yeah.
But one very good example of this in Silksong is the what's the area called? The swamp area. I forget what it's called, but the one where the one before the boss, I think, is called Growl the Great, the big frog. And that area is like a troll area, intentionally designed to be annoying by the designers, very clearly, if you play it. Because there are so many things that are super annoying. There's like traps everywhere. There are fake checkpoints that will like... No, they won't kill you. That's another area. Whatever. Nice. And then like if you drop into the water, you like consume a health charge, or you need to consume a health charge to be able to heal and stuff like that. So it's an area designed to be annoying. Also, if you look at the enemy design, they're very annoying. They're like hit and run, and they they go in, they attack, and then they run away and stuff. But anyways, so that area has the worst run back in the game, in my opinion. Now, just quick disclaimer, I don't think Silksong has very bad runbacks. Like it's pretty, like most runbacks are less than like 30 seconds. So it's not like, the runbacks in Silksong are very annoying.
Yeah.
But in the swamp area, the runback is pretty long, actually. And the thing that I noticed when I was playing, when I was trying to beat this boss, Growl the Great or whatever it was called, was that compared to the other bosses in the game, because this runback was like 2 or 3 times longer than any other runback that I had before in Silksong. And what I noticed was that while the boss wasn't very hard, I kept, what's it called? I kept choking on the boss because I was super afraid of having to redo the runback. Yeah. I was like every time I got to the boss, I was like, oh no, I need to do it this time, because otherwise I'm gonna have to do the super annoying runback. Yeah. And then I kept dying, and I was like, oh, fuck, no. And it's like, the boss isn't even that hard. Like, there are bosses that are way harder than that boss in Silksong. But it still ended up being one of the bosses that I struggled the most with, simply because of the pressure. Because, like, every time I got to the boss, I was like, okay, this has to be, the time I actually kill the boss. Because otherwise I'm gonna have to do the runback again. I can't be bothered. And And then I eventually beat him, and that was very nice. But like, I feel like a lot of people missed that part of the run back.
Yeah.
Um,
There is a risk with that kind of pressure, though. I'm not saying it's not like that. Pressure is very important, but there is a risk, which is that you'll end up playing more passively because
yes.
Well, you're scared of losing your progress or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Or like your characters in like XCOM or whatever, right? I think one of the reasons why someone would play more passively in XCOM is the permadeath as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because if you could just retry, then you wouldn't like you just
guys came back.
Yeah, you would like maybe try more and like, oh, okay, I don't care, right? Like you get what I'm saying, right? There is a point to being more passive if there is more pressure in that sense, right? So but that also helps the designers see where they need to put pressure, right?
Yeah.
To mitigate that, because like it's still a very important part of the I don't know what, like the how it should feel or whatever, right?
Yeah. I think this is actually very interesting. We could like go into this topic now, because we were gonna go into it later, but we can do it now. So it's like RNG in strategy games generally like promotes passive play, right? Because well, nothing is guaranteed, right? So you can't take a risk with your character and like expect it to always work. And so you actually, when you're playing a game with a lot of RNG, like XCOM or like something like Fire Emblem as well, you need to like well, you can't really, you need to play. Well, you should try to minimize the risk, basically, and that means that you play more passively, right? So compare that to something like Into the Breach, which doesn't have RNG in its attacks and stuff. In that game, you can be way more aggressive, right? So you can be like, okay, I'm gonna place my what's it called, like walker next to this big bug, and then I'm gonna do this attack because I know that it's always gonna work, and I know like what the chain reaction from that is gonna be, because everything is like super predictable and stuff like that. And so like it's not better or worse, like having RNG or not having RNG. It's just very different, right? And the problem with the problem that a lot of games with RNG have is that you know, like XCOM 1, it promotes very passive play. And so when you have RNG in your game, you need to have something else that puts pressure on the player, right? You need to create this like this dynamic of like you want to play super aggressively, but you want to play super aggressively as carefully as possible, because there's still RNG and some things might fail. And I think Fire Emblem, especially Fate's Conquest, does that very well. You know the legendary level, Edward? Which one is it? I forget which.
It's like in the water and stuff.
Yeah, there's like a port, and you're supposed to like protect the city, and it's like a defense mission. And so your like initial plan when you see the mission first is to like, okay, it's a defense mission, so I'm just gonna play as passively as possible. The problem is that there are like so many enemies and like so many high, like powerful enemies that do a lot of damage, that you need to actively push out first, and then you need to like slowly fall back to like better positions, because you need to like kill as many as possible as quickly as possible, because otherwise you will be completely overwhelmed. And like that mission is super interesting. Where it's like, because I guess it's just what I said. Like it forces you to play aggressively, but like if you overextend, you get punished and you lose and your characters die or whatever. Which that part you don't really get in something like Into the Breach, right? Because you're never really at the danger of overextending. Like technically you can have like a bad enemy spawn that you didn't know about like 2 turns later, but like for the most part, it's very hard to like overextend and make a mistake in Into the Breach.
Yeah.
Because everything is like so predetermined. But yeah, then you get the more aggressive playstyle, right? So it depends on what you want in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, and also like since Fire Emblem is an RPG, right? It becomes very like mathy, I guess, right? Where it's like the strategy in a way becomes to like manage how many enemies, I guess, you can deal with in one turn, right? And so that you can recover that on like health or whatever.
Yeah.
On, for example, your turn or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So it got a really nice dynamic there. It's not always utilized very well in like some of the games are very not well designed, right? But I guess Fate's Conquest is one of them that's kind of really nice, where it's like there is a lot of incentives to like play aggressively in a lot of the maps there, right?
Yeah, because they have like chests and stuff with item drops.
Yeah, and like yeah, you should, one of the things you can't grind in that one, so you want like all the extra stuff. For example, like you get extra. Like there's an early mission where it's like you need to run to a bunch of villages to save them because you get extra gold at the end or something, and it's like super important to get that gold because otherwise you don't have any items for later missions or whatever. I mean, you can probably do it without them, but still, right? And so you need to figure out this very aggressive plan, right?
Yeah, because like you're competing against the enemies, right?
Yeah.
Because they are also going for the villages,
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
and they are like in the better position to get to the villages, and so you need to play like really aggressively to actually get them, which is super interesting.
Yeah. That is also like one thing with the permadeath there, that I don't like. I don't know if it's the permadeath necessarily. Actually, that is that interesting in that game. It's more that you lose, like if your characters die, you lose, sort of, right? That kind of thing, right? I don't know if I'm not 100% sure how I think about that part specifically, right? Like, is it interesting because if you play in a way where you're not letting anyone die, right? Because it's permadeath. Or is it like, would it be as interesting if you just let them die? I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, I think I'm on the like game over side of that, because I don't think playing past your character dying in Fire Emblem is very interesting.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's like the permanent consequence of losing
because it makes the mission way easier, because like you can actually like let a lot of characters die if you like. That would only be a like an issue on your first run or whatever, right? Because when you know the game, you can be like, oh no, like this mage dude that was like 3 levels below the others is like, I can just put him out and the AI will go for him or something, right? And I'll not have to come up with an interesting strategy, right? I'll just win, right?
Or like you'll know, like, oh yeah, this mission is way harder than the others, so I'm just gonna like sacrifice one guy on this mission.
Yeah, or like fine. This turn, right? Because like a lot of the things, like for example that mission you talked about before, there's like this crucial turn in your strategy where it's like, no, it's not, like my strategy is not working, like beyond, like there's one turn where you need to figure out some way to get some more damage or take less damage, right?
Yeah.
And if you can just sacrifice one unit there, it becomes less interesting, I think.
Yeah.
But it's really important that you can't let your characters die, right? That wouldn't be interesting at all, right? Because I feel like a lot of strategy games, like similar like strategy RPGs or whatever, they do that where like, oh yeah, you can just let your characters die, they'll come back, and maybe they'll lose some stats or whatever, and that like completely destroys any element of strategy for me in that, right? I mean, there is probably, right, but you get what I'm saying. It's like completely uninteresting, because the interesting part is like optimizing the stuff, right?
Yeah, and you like remove the pressure a lot.
Yeah, there's no pressure, I guess, because you can just let them die, right?
I think one game that's very interesting, that's a bit similar to Fire Emblem, that like showcases this is Double Dungeon, that I talked about like a few podcasts ago. It's like it's a tactical RPG kind of, but it has the like dicey dungeons, throwing dice and assigning them mechanic instead of the traditional roll of dice when you attack.
Yeah.
And one thing that I found really interesting about that game was that, like, even though it wasn't very hard, it it was a little bit hard, but it could definitely have been a lot harder. But like, even though that, I still enjoyed the game quite a bit, because the thing it did was that it punished mistakes heavily. So like, if you put, because your characters didn't have a lot of HP in that game, like they were like 2 or 3 attacks to kill.
Yeah.
From the enemies, and at least on the hardest difficulty, which is the one I played. It's probably way easier on the easier difficulties. But anyways, and what I found very interesting was that there were a lot of runs that were like completely ruined by the fact that I like accidentally placed one of my characters like one tile too far, because that meant that, oh well, there was an archer over there that could reach him, because the archers have longer range, and so the archer just came up and like killed the guy because he's pretty low on health already, because he's already taken 2 attacks.
Yeah.
And so like that, like pressure from like every move has to be perfect sort of pressure, right?
Yeah.
Because if you make an imperfect move, you lose your character and you lose the run basically. That pressure is like super, super interesting. And going back to the start, that's not time pressure. That's not like turn time pressure. That's like pressure from making mistakes, right? It's like you need to be very careful about what you do, because if you make a misstep, you lose right away.
Yeah.
Which, of course, not every game has to do that, but some games do, like Double Dungeon and like Fire Emblem, and that's super interesting.
Yeah.
But there was one more thing.
I think I'm gonna go and be annoying here, right?
Go ahead.
And that's that I think pressure-heavy games are just more interesting.
Yes, but the pressure can come from other things.
Yeah,
right? It doesn't necessarily have to be just that.
But like we've talked about in the past, for example, like very checkpoint, like it's very in fashion or whatever to be very checkpoint heavy and very hard, right? Yeah. And I would probably argue that, at least for me, it's more interesting if it's easier, but there is like more pressure on the player.
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
So like run-based games, or longer between checkpoints, but not necessarily as hard of a challenge in the moment, right?
Yeah.
Because it like a very hard challenge without any pressure is very numb or whatever, right? It's like
yeah.
It's not. You actually don't feel that much from that, right? It's just
yeah. I mean, we talked about Celeste.
You do it over and over again until you end up with that one time where you do it, right?
Yeah.
So there's no emotions there or whatever, right?
Yeah, because we talked about Celeste last week, right?
Yeah.
And Celeste like very much personifies that, where it's like it's like a super difficult jump to do, but you just do it over and over, and there you don't lose anything when you fail the jump, so you just keep doing it over and over and over and over, and then eventually you do it. And like that sort of even though it's hard, it sort of becomes like brain dead in a way, right? Because you're just doing it until you like it becomes almost I think the problem is that you can like hope to be lucky in a way, right?
Yeah.
So like in a run-based game, you need to actually be able to do it consistently, because otherwise, because you keep getting tested over a long time, right? Whereas with a checkpoint heavy game like Celeste, you can just do it until you get lucky the first time, and then you don't need to do it again.
We talked about this in the past, where like if it's very checkpoint heavy, like if you take that to the extreme, you end up at puzzle, right? So it's a very different thing, right? Because puzzle games, like normal, not like action puzzle games, but like normal puzzle games, they don't have any pressure at all, right? They are just like logic. You like solve whatever, right? And so like they become a very different thing, which is like if you go in that direction, you need to think more about those things, and if you do that, you'll end up at something interesting, I think, right? Like puzzle games are interesting,
yes,
but you like, I feel like a lot of games, not necessarily like not all, or maybe not Celeste, I don't know, I haven't played. You have played Celeste, you better judging Celeste, but you need to like go in that direction more, right? Because if you don't have any pressure and you don't have anything to figure out, then there's not really anything there, right?
Yeah.
Because it's
because the way like puzzle games balance it is they make the what am I supposed to do super
that's
hard,
the
right?
hard part, yeah.
Instead of the execution. It's
there
like
is no execution in a puzzle game.
Exactly.
Like a puzzle game.
And like, to be clear, you already mentioned it, but like I like puzzle games a lot. So it's not that it's puzzle games are bad because they don't have pressure. It's like puzzle games realize puzzle games are designed around the fact that they don't have any pressure in a way, right? And so they work still. They're still good and they're still interesting. But a lot of action games are also designed around not having pressure, and they usually end up not very interesting.
I don't think that works as well. Unless they have some sort of puzzly elements, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like if it's more of a strategy action thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or something.
Well, I think even in strategy games, pressure is important, right? We just talked about Fire Emblem.
Yeah. But like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what I'm thinking of. Like a game where it's sort of puzzle but action or whatever, right?
Do you have an example?
I don't know. I'm thinking like Mask Quest or something, but I mean
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, that's like a puzzle platformer sort of almost, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Where it's like it's actually about figuring out what you're supposed to do, right? Like in a way, right? You wouldn't disagree with that, right? It's like, interesting. I should like breathe on the what do you call them? The sail.
On the boats and stuff.
Yeah. So make them move and like, what happens? Like physics. Like there's a lot of physics in game, right? Where it's like physics puzzles, where it's like, okay, you know what?
Yeah, that's true.
N++ or something like that, where it's like you need to understand how the physics works, but the challenge is actually very short or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's not a lot of pressure because it's about iterating, right? And doing it over and over again. I would argue like that you could even take that to the more like to some strategy games, right? Where it's like you talked about that game like Shadow Tactics, right?
Yeah,
sure. Where it's like that there's not a lot of pressure there, right?
No, yeah.
But so that's more puzzling again, right? Because it's like how should I do this and that and this thing, right?
Yeah, I think that's very good that you brought it up, because like the Shadow Tactics games, they're like designed for, because a problem with a lot of stealth games is that people just reload when they get detected, right?
Yeah.
And like the developers of Shadow Tactics kind of embraced that, and they were like, okay, we'll make a stealth game where you're supposed to like reload every time you get detected, but we make it like super hard to get past the guards. Like it's literally a puzzle to solve, right? It's like, okay, I need to kill this guard first, but wait, he's being covered by this other guard, so how do I get him?
Yeah.
Well, there are two guards looking at him, and then you like go all the way around until you find the guard that like, oh, here's a 2-second window where I can kill this guard, okay, and then you start unraveling everything.
Yeah.
And so it becomes very puzzly, and like,
that was sort of my point, right? Where it's like, if you remove pressure, then you need something else, and that something else usually is like something to solve, like a puzzle to solve in a way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my opinion. Or like we said earlier, with like purely creative stuff, right? Where like I'm building a house or something, I guess.
Although I do want to like throw some shade at factory games, because they are kind of related to like creative games in a way, like Minecraft and stuff. And I'm not a big fan of factory games like, what's it called? Factorio or Satisfactory and stuff like that. And I think my main problem with them is the lack of pressure.
More pressure, yeah.
Yeah.
Or more puzzles, right? Because
I think Factorio...
you can take it to the like...
yeah, you can take it to either extreme.
Well, what's those games called? Oh, the Sectronic games, right? Where it's like...
Oh, yeah. Well, they are actually puzzle games, right?
Yeah, but it's the same thing as a factory game, right? It's like optimizing a machine, right? But the thing is, there is a like puzzle to like do this much in this many cost thingies or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So you get like a puzzle to solve with like how much can I use to get the thing? But these factory games usually don't have that, so they become... If they don't have pressure, they become completely boring, right? Yeah, I agree with that.
I think Factorio does this better than a lot of them, because they have like the bugs that will, like,
they have more
go
pressure,
out and kill you and stuff. But I played, what was it called? I completely forget what it's called. Crap. But whatever. It was basically a factory game. No, it's not. Where like there wasn't any pressure whatsoever, and like the optimization is the point of a factory game. So it's like you have this inefficient factory, and then you like do some stuff to make it more efficient, and then you get a dopamine hit because wow, I made this more efficient, right? And it's fun. But the problem for me is that yeah, sure, I can make the factory more efficient, or I can just let it be inefficient and wait. Yeah. Like there's nothing forcing me to just like actually do it. I can just wait, and that becomes super boring for me because like I end up maybe putting a little bit of effort into like optimizing it, but then I'm like, okay, I can just wait for the rest, and then I end up bored because I'm just waiting. Yeah. And I feel like that's a very large problem with a lot of factory games. So yeah, I would definitely like to see one with a lot of pressure. And I think I haven't actually played a lot of this Actronic game. I've only tried like once. I should probably like get into those and try playing them because I've heard good things about them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And another thing is like that we have talked about in the past is like speedrun games, right? Mm-hmm. Because in like they do, and I think that's why they sell so well, because they do have a pressure incentive, which is to speedrun, right?
Yeah.
But the problem is that incentive is not mechanical, right? It's just a layer on top.
Yeah.
So
it's like
so it becomes this thing where like the people that don't like pressure, like people that don't like games, basically, I guess, right? Or whatever you want to say. I mean, we just said you don't need pressure to make games, or good games, but whatever, and like they don't like. It's people that think they like action games or whatever, right? But they don't actually like action games, or so. Yeah. Maybe I shouldn't put people in categories, but whatever. you get what I'm saying. They haven't thought through what they really want out of a game because they don't want what that game is offering, or whatever is my point. Yeah, but they can still like pretend that they like it or whatever. But and then you have the people that actually like it, which is like way smaller, like the amount of people. I guess another thing is like they don't really put I mean that you'll have a high scoreboard, right? But they don't. We talked about this in the past, right? Where it's like they don't punish you for not doing well, right? So there is no pressure technically, right? Unless you want the best score. Yeah. So people can just, play really slow and they think that they did well or whatever, right?
Or like know that they did well but still progress. I remember I mentioned this in like when we talked about Blood Thief.
Yeah.
Because one thing, like I usually don't like speedrun games, and I actually enjoyed Blood Thief a little bit. Yeah. And I think the main reason for that is because Blood Thief had like time, like in order to like progress to the next maps, you needed to actually have good times on some of the previous maps. Because that, like, usually when I play speedrun games, I just play through them and then I have bad times on all the levels because I suck at the game, because I haven't played it much, and then I stop playing the game and it's like I never think of it again. But with Blood Thief, I had to actually go back and was like, oh shit, I have a really bad time on this level. I need to actually fix it. Yeah. And so like I actually had to do it fast, and I think that helped a lot.
Yeah.
Because that's the only speedrun game that I've ever enjoyed at all. Like I have very bad opinions of speedrun games in general. Yeah. Like there are probably good ones that I haven't played, but like most the ones I have played are generally not very good.
Yeah. Because they are probably pretty good if you play them in a way.
Yeah.
Like if you play them
for time. Yeah.
For time, right? But if you're like, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
But I wanted to go back very briefly to Silksong. Because there is one thing that Silksong got a bit of criticism from as well, which I think is very bad criticism, and that's critique of their combat arenas. So Silksong has some sections, like, so Silksong is like an open world Metroidvania, right? So you like walk around in the world and you can go anywhere if you have like the right stuff unlocked and stuff like that. And the problem with a lot of 2D side-scrollers, especially modern 2D side-scrollers, is that you can kind of cheese the enemies by like aggroing them and then retreating. So it's like you walk up to the enemy, you hit them once or twice, and then when they get aggroed, or like a group of enemies get aggroed, you like walk back a bit, and then you like take them out one by one because they're like coming towards you in a line. And Silksong does this thing where they have like combat arenas. So it's like you enter a room, and then the doors lock, and enemies start spawning.
Yeah.
And a lot of people criticize this because it's like, you know, whatever they say, it's like it's unfair, it's not fun, you know, you're not utilizing the open world or whatever, you know, a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
But the thing is that these combat arenas are actually really, really good because they put pressure on the player, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't do that. You can't like cheese the enemy AI and like aggro them and run away. You need to actively like play and like take them out, and you need to handle, because they spawn in waves, right?
Yeah.
And so you need to kill them quickly. So I don't know if this waves spawn on a timer or if they wait for you to kill everyone. But anyways, it's like, because they'll spawn 2 flying enemies, and then they'll spawn 3 enemies on the ground. And so you need to like deal with the guys on the ground while the flying enemies are harassing you. And it's like a super interesting gameplay scenario. But of course people dislike it because, you know, they're used to being able to hitting the enemy and then running away a bit, and then hitting the enemy and then running away a bit, and they can't do that here. They need to actually solve the combat situation. But that's interesting, right? And that's pressure, and pressure is interesting.
Yeah, I think actually that might be partly like one of the many reasons why Dark Souls did so well, because if you look at open world games around that era, right?
Yeah,
they are very like, even if it's hard, right, there is no pressure, because this idea of like, you know, in Souls, right, you have the fog gate and the boss, and if you don't like, you can't progress because it's a wall, right?
Yeah.
So it's like a skill check there, right? So you need to figure out how to deal with that, otherwise you can't continue. And I feel like a lot of open world games, again from that time, right, didn't have that. Right? Would you agree? Like, I'm thinking like Skyrim and stuff, right? Where it's like you're just walking around in the open world, right? So there's not, you can just cheese stuff if you want to, right?
I mean, they did have dungeons, but they were also pretty cheesable because
I mean, you could still walk like far away from enemies. Yeah, exactly. There wasn't like a boss that locked you in a small room and killed you, right?
No. Well, maybe the bosses did, but not like the other
maybe
encounters. Yeah, I don't remember. I haven't played Skyrim in a long time.
yeah.
But yeah, in general, yeah, because one thing I did remember from Skyrim was that the dungeons were pretty bad, because like you could like walk into like, I remember there was this like crypt dungeon thing where there were like mummies or like skeletons and stuff, and you could like walk into like a corridor and make all of them spawn, and so they like stepped out of their tombs and stuff, and then you could just like go back into the corridor and then just wait for them to come towards you like in a line, because the corridor was like only one guy wide. And so you could just take them out one by one, and that was like super uninteresting.
Nice.
But yeah, it was ages ago I played Skyrim.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think like forcing combat encounters like that, like Silksong does, is good, because like you want, because like as a player in the moment, it feels bad to be forced, right? Because it's like, I think that anymore. Well, I mean, you don't, because you've played so many games that do it well and stuff. But like for someone that doesn't play as many games or like isn't as experienced or whatever, it like feels bad because they've been able to like cheese the AI before, but now they can't all of a sudden, and so it feels like weird and arbitrary. But it's actually way more interesting to have to deal with that scenario. It
is, I have to say, in my opinion, a bit strange to me to play Silksong and not want to engage with the combat, right?
I mean, it's a very popular game, so I think.
You're saying it's because people, like, it's just FOMO, is what you're saying, that people just want to talk about the new thing and they don't actually want to play Silksong. I mean, that makes a lot of sense, actually.
I think that's where a lot of the criticism of Silksong comes, because like that was like the most hyped game ever, right, when that came out.
Maybe not ever, but
no, we still have GTA 6, right? But I mean, but still, it's like one of the most. But it's one of the most like hyped indie games, at least.
Yeah, indie games,
and so I think a lot of people played it because it was hyped, right? And I think that's where a lot of the
you're right.
Controversy around Silksong came from. Because
I want to enjoy it as well, so I can talk about it. But I don't actually want to put in the effort to play it because I don't care about the game. Yeah, I know. Putting words in people's mouths again, but
I think that's the case.
Yeah, you're right.
You wanted to speak about shmup bombs, right? You had some controversial opinions.
I have controversial opinions.
Yes. Go ahead.
I don't think they are controversial because, like, I think, like, if you look at the games that are popular, I mean, there is a variety, but yeah, I guess I'll go into it and I'll talk about it. So, like, I read a lot of stuff that, like, shmup people, like developers and stuff, and players that give feedback to developers and stuff talk about, right? And yeah, we've talked about this in the past, but it's like even in those what do you call it, circles? Do you call it circles in English?
Yeah.
They are more aware of this stuff that we're talking about, right? Where it's like because they actually want challenge and stuff, but they are still a bit not all of them, of course, but a bit I don't know, susceptible or whatever to this stuff, right? We're talking about where it's like, oh no, it shouldn't be this way because it's not fun or whatever, right? That, like, they recognize the run part, but then they'll not recognize it in other parts. One example of that, right, which I'm gonna bring up now, is bombing, right? Because so a lot, not all of course, but a lot of modern shmups have this idea that losing your bombs when you die is not fun, right? Even really good ones, by the way. So, like, even really, really good ones do this. But that's not necessarily true, in my opinion, right? Because the argument is that, well, shmup, I mean, not necessarily because the reason you don't lose them is because of that reason. That's the reason, right? Because it feels bad to lose them. But there is this, like, I don't know what to call it, like a split between thinking about bombs as a resource to use versus, like, what do you say, like a
pressure mechanic?
No, like a pressure release mechanic, I guess.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
A way to just, no, I can't deal with this, click this button, right? And those two create fundamentally very different experiences, in my opinion. And I feel like a lot of, again, not all of them, but a lot of the developers are a bit dismissive about the one where, like, the bomb is not used as a mechanic, it's used as a pressure release thing, right? And the interesting thing is that if you look at a lot of the, like, really good bullet hell games, like Dodonpachi, for example, right? They do work this way, right? Where they're like you like, they go even further. So in Dodonpachi, you're not supposed to use your bombs at all because you get score from not like for having bombs. So you're just not supposed to use them at all. You're supposed to save them up, right? And when you die, you lose them, right? If you have more than, I mean, yeah, you get, they work differently, some of them, but like, yeah. And so what was my point with that? Well, it's that so, like, if you have a game where let's say you have 3 bombs and you die with 3 bombs, you lose those bombs, right? That feels really bad in that moment, yes, like usual, right? We talk about that. Yes, that feels bad. It feels bad to die and not having wasted 3 potential ways to, like, dodge some bullets, right? But what it does is it creates this really interesting dynamic where, like, well, if as you use them, you actually release pressure, right? Because well, first of all, it creates pressure, right? Which is fun. Again, we're talking about emotions, right? Emotions is fun. We want not emotions. It's like, oh, I need to use, like when you have full bomb stock, maybe you'll be like more trigger happy with the bombs, right? Because you're stressed, and then, like, as your bombs go down, you'll be like less trigger happy or whatever, right? And in this case, we're talking about a game where, like, you can use them, but not like maybe you don't lose score for using them, but you lose them when you die, right? Because if you're playing a game where you don't, like, you shouldn't use them, then you shouldn't use them at all, right? Which, I mean, yeah, there's arguments for both ways there, but whatever. Too many details here, whatever. It doesn't matter. So the point is, you create this pressure up and down, right? And then you have, when you get to 0 bombs, right? You feel like then you basically have no pressure, because it's like, okay, well, now I can only dodge, right? So you have this like pressure tension thing that goes up and down, like in the run. And a lot of the newer games, again, really fun games, they don't have this, because like, for example, Gunvein, right? We talked about Bogog a lot, right? Gunvein, you gain bombs by picking up these bomb charges, and you have a max cap of 3 bombs. I'm not saying that system is not interesting, right? That system is interesting in and of itself. It's just, you're not like you're basically, you can use bombs more freely, and you're not, I mean, obviously you're still gonna be upset that you died with bombs, right? Because you died. But it's not this extra layer on top where it's like, no, it's really shutting you down because you lost all your bombs when you died or whatever, right? I don't actually remember if you lose them in that games particularly when you die. Maybe you do in that game, but there are games where, like, no, you keep your, like, your bomb stock is kept throughout. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, your bomb stock is not tied to your lives, right? It doesn't, like, for example, Emerald Blue does that, right? And to me, that's less interesting, because then it doesn't really matter when I use the bombs, right? So, like, if I died and then used the bombs, that's fine, right?
Yeah.
Because depending on how fast you get the bombs back or whatever, right? So I guess in a way, Gunvein mitigates it a bit because it gives you a lot of bombs, right? But in that game, it's more of a mechanic, right?
Yeah.
And I think, like, that's intentional, right? So I'm not saying that's bad. It's interesting. It's just that there is another side, right? And I feel like that's utilized in modern shmups. That's my entire point. My entire point is not that they're the other way of thinking about it, because it makes sense to think in the other way as well, right? Where it's like, no, it's a mechanic. You think bombs is one of the most fun things, and it should be a very utilized mechanic, right? Versus, no, it's a way to, like, mitigate mistakes, right? In a limited amount, right? It's like two fundamentally different ways to look at the problem, right?
Yeah. I think I spoke about this, I don't remember, but it was a previous episode, maybe a few weeks ago. Because, like, you play way more shmups than me, so I'm like fairly bad at shmups in comparison. And one of the one of the things that I find really interesting about bombs, because when I first started playing shmups, I was like, I really hated bombs because, like, I underutilized them, right? So I wanted to save my bombs, so I ended up not using them and just dying instead, and I would die with all of my bombs left, right?
Yeah.
In, like, games where you keep bombs when you die.
Yeah.
And what I realized after playing a bit more was that, oh wait, this is, like, super interesting, because there is so much skill in bombing at the right time, right?
Yeah.
It's like, because if you bomb too much, like, if there's, because when you see, basically, when you're in, like, a tough situation in a shmup, you need to always, like, in the back of your mind, evaluate, is this too hard? Should I bomb or not?
Yeah.
And the problem is that, like, because I'm bad at shmups, I'm like, oh no, I need to save my bombs until it's, like, super, super hard. So I'm not going to do it yet. But it's like, oh wait, it was actually too hard. So now I'm dying.
Yeah.
And so, like, I've lost a life instead of a bomb. And a life is way more valuable than a bomb. And it was like, and so it creates this very interesting dynamic where it's like, it's essentially risk-reward, right?
Yeah.
It's like, you take the risk not to bomb, and maybe you're rewarded, but maybe you're punished for it. And, like, I think going back to what you said about, like, in Dodonpachi, you know, you the optimal strat is to not use bombs at all.
Yeah.
I feel like that, I don't know if misses the point is the right way to say it, but it's like, what do I even mean? It's like, it's fine that the optimal thing is not to use the bomb, because like at that point you're so good at the game that you don't need them, like actually don't need them. But like for someone learning the game, they are like a super interesting mechanic, because they need to use bombs in order to like progress and like beat the game and stuff.
And I also think like so like again the argument is that you said well, you shouldn't use the bombs because that's the optimal strat, right? That is true, but like and maybe someone that's very skilled at Dodonpachi can tell me in the comments or something, right? But in theory, if like you will balance the game in a way to where like it's forcing you to do the score versus not dying trade-off at some point, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, in Dodonpachi's case, it's probably Hibachi, right? Where you need to use basically all your bombs, but then you don't lose as much score, right? Because it's in the end, right? So the like true last boss or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But and maybe you want it to be more aggressive than that with your bombs, right? Like.
Yeah.
Again, my point is not that the other way is not interesting, because there is also using it as a mechanic is also interesting, right? You just need to create pressure in other ways, like that kind of pressure.
Yeah.
Because then it becomes more about like you get the same loop, right? Essentially what we're talking about, where it's like, oh, should I use my bomb or not? It's just that it's more lenient, right? You'll get a game where like you need to think about, like, you can make a way harder game, but you need to think about, should I use the bomb in interval, like in shorter intervals, right? Versus a game where it's like you're thinking about the bombs on the entire game scale, right? Because it's like if you recharge bombs, let's say you recharge 3 bombs in a stage, then it's about when should I use the bomb in the stage, right? So there's less pressure, but it's still the same thing. Versus like you have 3 bombs on this life, and like how many lives can I have, and like you need to think more like further, right? So yeah, again, it's like both are interesting. It's just that it makes me frustrated or whatever that people are very dismissive about this style of like this. I guess I can call it the older style in quotation marks, right? But then if I look at a lot of good games, right, they like that people think are good, they do it in this way, and I don't think it's like a coincidence only, right? Because I think it does make it interesting in like, right? You get what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
I mean, there's good like ones that people like that don't do it as well, right? I'm just saying there are a lot that do it, and I don't think it's just they like, it's not the classic, modern game design argument where it's like, well, they just did it like that back in the day, and it was good despite it. I don't think that's the case, right? I think that's part of why it's good, right?
Yeah, and I think this is all part of like another point that I wanted to bring up, and that's like perhaps surprisingly has like a connection to RPGs. Ooh. And that's that like it's fine that or well, I guess it's almost natural, like it's not only fine, like you basically can't do anything about it, but I think this like modern bomb or whatever you want to call it is like a way to solve this thing, which isn't really a problem in my opinion, and that's that playing better will reduce pressure. Right. So I think the Dodonpachi example is a good example of that. Like if you're good at the game, you're gonna need fewer bombs or no bombs at all. But that's like fine, because that's like a natural evolution of the gameplay, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
As you get better at it. And the like connection I want to make here is to RPGs and like OP builds. Does that make sense? Right?
I mean, a little bit.
Because like a lot of people rightfully complain that it's a lot of RPGs are very easy to trivialize because you can make an OP build and then you don't think for the rest of the game, and that is true. That is like a big problem with a lot of RPGs, most even perhaps you could say, and like roguelikes and stuff like that, synergy builders and so on. But there are a few of them that do this very well, and the thing is that like, yes, having a good build will reduce your pressure, but like because like the game becomes easier, right? The better your build
Yeah.
is. But like the reason that the pressure is lower is essentially because you are better at the game, right?
Yeah.
And so it makes sense that the pressure is lower.
Yeah.
And so if
It does.
yeah, sorry. What?
No, it does. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you look at something like Dicey Dungeons, I remember when we talked about Dicey Dungeons, we talked about this.
Yeah.
Dicey Dungeons does OP builds very well because it has like the Witch. I remember I talked about the Witch where I had this OP build that was like that could like infinitely block the enemies from making attacks. But like the reason that I got to that point and to that build was because I was good at the game. And so the fact that it sort of relieves the pressure in the like moment to moment, what should I do now thing, doesn't really matter, right? Because it's kind of natural that the pressure reduces as I get better at the game. And I think Dicey Dungeons does it especially well, because even though you have an OP build in Dicey Dungeons, you still need to play well, right? You need to execute the build well.
But I mean,
so it's like
okay, I don't even think so. Maybe a controversial opinion ahead or something. But I feel like a lot of like the discussions around RPGs and what parts of them are like. How should I say this? Like RPGs are usually like lumped together with strategy games, right? In a way, because people are listening. Oh, it's a strategy game, right? And it is a strategy game, but not in the way that most people see it. It seems like to me, at least. Maybe some people do see it this way, right? Because like they'll always argue, like you said, oh, you got the OP build and the game broke or whatever, right? But that like if you don't want that part, then you don't want an RPG, because that is the strategy part of an RPG. The strategy part of an RPG is not it's not chess, okay? It's not like, oh, I placed my pawn here and so now you can't do that. Like that's not the thing. The thing is to like strategize and theory craft the math to the point where the game breaks, right? That is the point of an RPG. The problem, like you said, is not that you can do that, it's that it's too easy, right?
Yeah.
It should be harder to get to that point.
Yeah.
And that's why something like Dicey Dungeons works way better, because it's like a roguelike and it's a run based and it's harder to do it, right? It's not that easy to break.
Yeah.
And it's also why RNG works well in RPGs, right? Because RNG and statistics works really well, right? Like you get what I'm saying, right? Where it's like, oh, I need to like, because then the numbers are not, oh, I need to guess that, make sure this number is above this number. You need to make sure that the number is above this number and that you can reliably get something else to happen as well, right?
Yeah.
But it's all about like optimizing the
synergies.
Yeah, the synergies. Like that's the only interesting part in an RPG. Otherwise, you can just remove the RPG elements, right? And I feel like maybe a lot of people that talk about them actually do want, like, they want strategy games, but they're like they want the RPGs for the addicting part, right? Like the modern meta bullshit stuff, right? Not actually because they like RPGs. Yeah,
I was gonna say, to be fair, like, RPGs are very, very popular nowadays, and I think that's because of the like dopamine synergy
for sure,
stuff. And not the actual,
not
that they actually bring interesting
action
gameplay.
RPGs are like
the most like games like The Witcher and stuff like that.
Like action RPGs makes basically no sense in my opinion. I don't think. I mean, obviously there are good action RPGs, but that's more like, in my opinion, like
despite
not
because
the RPG parts.
Yeah, right? I agree.
Because they are always taking away from it, and I think that's also part of why people have a negative like the more I don't know what you say, like people that think more seriously about design, right, have a negative
opinion of RPGs,
right? Because it's usually this added on thing to make it addicting, right? But if you made a game and there are games that do this, by the way, so, right? Like we talked about, like Dicey Dungeons is basically that, right? Where you focus on the build. I mean, deck builders are in a way that as well, right? And there people recognize it better, I would say, right?
Yeah.
But again, they might suffer from this similar
I think the main problem with a lot of deck builders is like lack of balance.
Because they do the same thing where it's like you need to find the synergies. It's not about like, oh, I have this super carefully crafted strategy where like I place this thing here and this thing here and that thing there. It's more like, no, like I've figured out that if I have this card, and this card, I'm unbeatable or whatever, right? I mean, it needs to be hard to get to that point in the game as well, right? Otherwise, it's not interesting. But because you can't just these three pick these three cards in the beginning and you win, right? That's not interesting, obviously. It needs to be a challenge to get to the point where you get the things you need so that the game is broken or whatever. But it shouldn't be like execution hard. Or how am I saying? Like execution, as in like not as in whatever, like action RPG execution or whatever, right? Like, oh, I need to dodge or whatever, or I need to have time pressure. I mean, you can have time pressure if you want, but generally not like time pressure, more like turn pressure in that case, right? It's more interesting, like we said earlier.
I think one like genre of games that I would like I don't think there are any good games in this genre yet.
What?
I haven't played any at least.
Not a single
but I do think this genre has potential, and that is auto battlers. Because they are like in a sense pure synergy builders, right? And so like an auto battler that actually had, you know, interesting, well balanced synergy build gameplay would be super interesting, but I haven't played any that do it well yet.
Are they
like
run
all
based
of them are
usually, or like how do they?
It depends. There are there are a lot of like, you know, new roguelike auto battlers. That's like the new big thing, I guess. And like none of those are especially good in my opinion. And then there's like what's it called, Unicorn Overlord. That's more like a traditional RPG with like a story and stuff like that. But that game was almost good. It was like way too long and had like way too many characters, and like all modern games, it's like way too big and it's like 100 hours long and whatever. I don't know how long it is, but it was too long for me.
Also, it's what's the studio? I don't remember. They usually make way too long games. Like that's their thing. What are they called? I don't remember.
I don't remember. But
Vanillaware?
Yeah, I think it is. But yeah, like the game was interesting at the start. And I was like, maybe this is actually an interesting synergy builder. And then it kind of got tedious towards the end because like, okay, because the thing that game does is like you have a lot of teams that like go around on the map. And like, it was just it was way too much to manage. It was way too much micromanagement. And like, you had like some teams that were super powerful and then like some teams that were the B team, and like the super powerful teams weren't that interesting because they were super powerful, or it was kind of meh execution. But that's definitely something I want to see explored further by like some really good designer.
You hear that, game designers in the comment section? Make good auto battlers.
Yes.
I don't know. I mean, I want other genres as well. So I don't know, but I see what you're saying.
There is sort of one more thing, unless you have something more you want to say. With going back to pressure, right? And that's this sort of saying among like gamers and game designers that you should let players take their time, or let players do things at their own pace.
Kill the player.
Kill
the player.
No, well,
that should be the saying should be that instead. Kill the player.
Yeah. Because I was trying out a game called Thysiastery, which like the reason you showed me that game because you were like, oh, this is like a dungeon crawler that has a bunch of negative reviews. Yeah. It's probably good. Like as a joke.
No, I mean it wasn't a joke. Like
but kind of a joke, but also
I mean it's not a joke that maybe I don't know.
Like it's a funny thing.
I mean
but it's true,
it's
right?
basically always true. Like if it's like 50% reviews, it's probably good, right?
Yeah. And one thing that the game does is that it has like, so it's a dungeon crawler, right? Yeah. And if you spend too much, like too many turns
like
on
a
level,
dungeon crawler technically, I guess. I don't know terms, but it's like, you know, tiles and turn-based combat, JRPG style, right? Right, you played it.
Yeah. But yeah, so one of the mechanics in the game is that it has like a turn timer, and like if you spend too many turns on a level, it will spawn like this powerful enemy that will start chasing you. That's super powerful, and that's probably gonna kill you. And what I saw was a lot of the people in the reviews mentioned like, oh, this is bad design because I want to like take my time and explore things. But the thing is that like, if you don't have this looming threat of the enemy that's gonna come and kill you, like, or like, are you even making any decisions? Is kind of my question.
Yeah.
It's like, right? Because if there is pressure, then you need to be like, okay, do I go down this corridor or this corridor? Or like, oh, well, I've already spent a lot of time here, but maybe it's worth the risk to like check this chest over here. Maybe it has a good item in it or whatever.
Yeah.
And like, there's a bunch of interesting decisions that come from putting some pressure on the player, like making them choose between things. Whereas if you let the player take their time, what will end up happening is that but the player will just do everything, right?
Yeah.
They'll like clear the dungeon. And,
and also it doesn't matter like if we're talking like strategy or like optimizing your synergy, it doesn't matter what you do because you can just use time to compensate for it, right?
Yeah. And this actually inspired me, or well, inspired me is perhaps the wrong word, but it reminded me of two games. So if you watched the podcast before, you know that I'm a big fan of Europa Universalis 4, the grand strategy game. It's very excellent. Now that game is made by Paradox Interactive. And Paradox Interactive have made a lot of other games, but one of them that I have played a lot, which is, I'm a bit ashamed to admit, I haven't played it like too much. Well, I have played it too much, but I haven't played it like insanely a lot, but I have played it more than I would like. And that's CK3, Crusader Kings 3. Now, the reason that I say that I don't like Crusader Kings 3 is that if you compare EU4 to CK3, it's very clear that like one of the, like they are pretty different games in general, but one of the things that CK3 does, it's like, it's basically like set in medieval times, right? So you have like, they have this mechanic with like inheritance, so you have your king, and then when he dies, his land gets split among his heirs, right? So like if you have a lot of sons, your land gets more split up than if you have fewer sons and stuff like that. And at first I thought that was like a really interesting mechanic because like it means that you're not constantly snowballing, right? It's like you're expanding and then your character dies and then the realm like splits between the sons and then you play as one of the sons and you need to like spend some time to like.
But maybe it is.
Well, I thought that was like interesting, sort of in a way to balance, because one of the problems with a lot of these kinds of games is that you end up snowballing. It's like you become way too powerful way too fast, and then everything becomes
right.
But
But
so
won't
like,
that just go like never go anywhere because it's like now you have big
yes.
land, now you have small land, now you have big land, now you have small.
Well,
land.
no, because the thing is that what ends up happening usually is that you expand a bit, then your realm gets split, and then you like consolidate your realm, and then you expand a bit, and then your realm gets split. So like you have enough time to like collect everything again. Okay. And then expand a little bit more. But the problem with this mechanic is that this doesn't only apply to the player, it applies to the AI as well. And this is where the problem comes. So what ends up happening is that if you have a powerful AI empire or whatever, that's like a real adversary for you as the player, the optimal strategy to beat that empire is to wait. Because if you wait, the like emperor will die and everything will get split. Yeah. And then, their children will die and everything will get split. And so what ends up happening is that the like AI realms become smaller and smaller with time because they're like super unstable. And like, it ends up not working whatsoever, right? Because, sure, the player loses some stuff, but like, there's no pressure on the player because the optimal strat essentially for lowest effort is to wait, because waiting will make the enemy weaker. Whereas the reason I brought up EU4, which is a much better game, and it's actually an excellent game in my opinion, it's one of my favorite games, is that EU4 is very much the opposite of this. EU4 is almost like a survival game in a way, where it's like you need to like be aggressive and expand and like go to war with other people and take land and become richer, because if you don't, everyone else around you will do it, and then they will be powerful enough to kill you.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of like, it's just very interesting, like the difference between those two games. It's like in EU4, the AI becomes way more powerful with time because they keep consolidating and becoming stronger and stronger and stronger. And so there's always pressure for you to like keep playing and keep putting in effort and keeping expanding until you become the most powerful. Then it's kind of easy again.
Yeah.
But nobody plays beyond that point because it's boring. Whereas in CK3, it's like the optimal strat is always to wait and not do anything, because everyone will become weaker with time. And so there's no pressure on the player. I guess that's sort of my my point.
Yep.
It's like, yeah. EU4 is more interesting because there's actually pressure on the player, and CK3 is not interesting. Because I think the reason I bring this up is because in the CK3 community, there's like, I think a lot of people recognize that it's not a very good or interesting game, but I see a lot of people like discuss the game, and it's like, they're discussing things that aren't really a problem. Like, they are a problem, but it's not the main problem, right? And I just find that, like, as it usually is with games like this, or with games in general. Yeah. But, like, it's very obvious to me that the problem is that, you know, you can just wait out everything. Yeah. Waiting out stuff is the main strategy, and, like, that's not interesting whatsoever. It's super boring. So, yeah, you shouldn't... And that sort of goes back to the original point I had with like letting the player take their time. It's like, no, don't let the player take their time. Put pressure on the player. Force them to act now, and like don't make them, like, don't allow them to wait, because that will be boring.
Yes.
Is sort of my point. Yeah.
Yep.
Rant over. I don't know. I think we've covered almost everything, unless you have something else you want to bring up.
No, we have covered most things, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess that's it from us today, guys. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to leave a comment if you have something interesting to say, or if you have something uninteresting to say, we will read that too. And like and dislike and subscribe and all that. And yeah, thank you for
our
watching.
subs are, since they're watching our videos, they're smart, right? So they can't leave uninteresting comments.
True. Yeah. If that's true, but you're only unable to leave interesting comments if you're subscribed. So if you're gonna leave a comment, make sure you subscribe so that your comment becomes interesting, right? Yes. Yeah. That's the secret sauce or whatever. Yeah. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.
Bye everyone.